Imagine this. You're lying awake at 3:17 a.m. The world outside is hushed, a velvet silence pressing against the windows. Your body is warm beneath expensive sheets, your stomach full from a good meal, your physical needs met far beyond what most humans across history or geography could ever dream of. Yet, inside your skull, a tempest rages. A familiar, gnawing dread coils in your gut, a litany of anxieties about work, relationships, money, the looming, shapeless future, circles like vultures over a carcass. You know this feeling intimately. It's the cold sweat on your palms, the constriction in your chest, the relentless replay of potential failures and past humiliations. It's comfortable, not pleasant, never pleasant, but known. A familiar landscape of shadow. Now, imagine something else. A sudden, inexplicable shift, a moment of profound, unnatural calm. All the noise stops, the dread evaporates, the anxieties dissolve like smoke. For a single suspended heartbeat, there is only peace, a deep, oceanic stillness within you, pure, unadulterated presence. The weight is simply gone. What happens next inside you? Be brutally honest. Does a wave of pure, dizzying relief wash over you? Or is there something else? A subtle, unsettling void, strange, almost imperceptible sense of loss? Does a quiet, insidious whisper arise? But what now? Who am I without this weight? Is this even real? Does the silence itself feel somehow wrong, even threatening? Do you find yourself almost reflexively reaching back into the familiar chaos, grabbing onto the nearest anxious thought, pulling the comforting blanket of worry back over yourself, just to feel something recognizable? This is the unsettling paradox. We spend our lives chasing comfort, security, pleasure, fleeing pain, avoiding suffering at all costs. We medicate it, distract ourselves from it, build elaborate fortresses of success and consumption to keep it at bay. We declare war on discomfort, and yet, why does the suffering persist? Why does it mutate, finding new cracks in our defenses? Why, when offered a fleeting moment of genuine reprieve, do we sometimes recoil? Why does that quiet void feel more terrifying than the familiar storm? Is it possible that beneath the conscious cries for relief, a hidden, counterintuitive truth resides? Could it be that on some profound subterranean level, you are attached to your suffering, that you've forged an unconscious, almost addictive bond with the very pain you profess to despise? That this familiar ache, this predictable turmoil, has become more than just an enemy. It's become a twisted kind of home, a perverse anchor in the chaotic sea of existence. Think about it. How much of your internal narrative revolves around your struggles, your disappointments, your fears? How much of your identity is woven from the threads of past hurts and ongoing battles? Who would you be if you weren't fighting something? If the war inside you simply ceased? If the story of your suffering vanished, what story would be left? Is the prospect of that blank page more terrifying than the familiar, painful script you've been rehearsing for years, perhaps decades? This isn't about blaming you for your pain. Suffering is an inescapable thread in the human tapestry. But what if your relationship with it is far more complex, far more chosen on levels you barely comprehend than you ever dared to suspect? What if the chains aren't just external circumstances, but forged deep within the furnace of your own psyche? What if the prison door isn't locked from the outside, but from the inside, by a part of you that fears freedom more than captivity? The air grows thick with this unspoken possibility. The comfortable numbness of familiar pain suddenly feels charged, electric with hidden meaning. The silence after the storm isn't just relief, it's an interrogation room. The question hangs, heavy and unavoidable, in the pre-dawn stillness. What if you are not just a victim of your suffering, but its secret architect, its most loyal custodian? To answer that, we must descend into the shadowed roots of this hidden addiction, where psychology and philosophy whisper uncomfortable truths about the human soul's strange dance with darkness. That pre-dawn silence, thick with the echo of your recoil from peace. It's not an anomaly. It's a crack in the facade, revealing the hidden architecture beneath your suffering. We flee pain, yes, but we also cultivate it. We water it with our attention, shelter it with our narratives, and wear it like a familiar, albeit tattered, cloak. Why? Why would the human psyche, that marvel of evolution, cling so tenaciously to its own agony? The answer lies not in simple masochism, but in a complex, unconscious entanglement where suffering becomes functional. It becomes a tool, a perverse anchor in the terrifying vastness of existence. To understand this, we must descend into the shadowed realms mapped by thinkers who dared stare into the abyss within. Consider first the raw pulsing force Arthur Schopenhauer identified, the relentless, blind will, not willpower, but a primal, insatiable drive, the engine of life itself, forever craving, forever striving, forever lacking. For Schopenhauer, existence is suffering because the will is inherently unsatisfiable. Satisfaction is fleeting. Desire is eternal. Suffering, then, isn't an accident. It's the default state. We are born thirsty in an ocean of salt water. Our addiction begins here, not to suffering itself, but to the chase, the desperate, ceaseless, striving to quench an unquenchable thirst. The suffering becomes the proof we are alive, that the will is still burning. Without the gnawing ache of desire, without the friction of struggle, would we feel anything at all? The void of true stillness, of desire extinguished, can feel like annihilation. So, we cling to the ache. It confirms our being. Carl Jung, then, illuminates the shadow theater within. He spoke of the shadow, the repository of everything we disown, reject, and deem unacceptable within ourselves, our rage, our pettiness, our shame, our primal instinct. This rejected self doesn't vanish, it festers. And how do we keep it at bay? Often through neurosis, suffering, anxiety, depression, chronic dissatisfaction can become a sophisticated defense mechanism. It's a manageable, familiar pain that distracts us from confronting the far more terrifying specter of our own wholeness, our own darkness. The known agony of your daily anxiety loop is safer than the unknown terror of integrating your repressed fury or confronting the depths of your potential. Your suffering becomes a shield, a walled garden protecting you, you believe, from the wild, untamed jungle of your complete self. It's a perverse bargain. Endure the familiar torment to avoid the potentially shattering encounter with your true, unvarnished nature. Zoom out further, and societal forces conspire to reinforce this addiction. Aldous Huxley, in his chillingly prescient Brave New World, warned of a society pacified by pleasure and distraction, where discomfort is chemically erased. But our world often operates on a different, yet equally binding principle, the cult of struggle as virtue. We are conditioned to believe that worth is earned through suffering. No pain, no gain. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Suffering becomes synonymous with nobility, depth, and authenticity. To be free of it might imply shallowness, laziness, or a lack of seriousness. Your identity becomes interwoven with your battles, the survivor, the fighter, the one who overcomes. Who are you without the war? The prospect can feel like erasure. This societal narrative feeds the addiction, turning the poison into a perverse badge of honor. Jean-Paul Sartre chimes in with the existential weight. Hell is other people, yes, but perhaps more fundamentally, hell is freedom. Sartre declared we are condemned to be free. This radical freedom, the terrifying responsibility to define ourselves entirely with no pre-given essence, is an unbearable burden for many. Suffering provides a structure, a ready-made identity, a predetermined script. I am anxious. I am depressed. I am a victim of circumstance. These labels, though painful, offer a cage. They limit the terrifying horizon of possibility. Your suffering becomes the walls of your existential prison, but you are the jailer who fears the open sky. The addiction is to limitation itself, a desperate grasp for definition in the face of the infinite, dizzying abyss of choice and responsibility. And Viktor Frankl, emerging from the literal hell of Auschwitz, offered a profound counterpoint, meaning, yet even here the shadow of addiction lurks. If we cannot find meaning despite suffering, might we unconsciously cling to suffering as meaning? Does the constant narrative of hardship become the only story we know how to tell, the only lens through which we perceive value in our existence? When meaning is elusive, suffering rushes in to fill the vacuum. It provides intensity, drama, a sense of mattering, however negative. The dull ache becomes preferable to the terrifying silence of meaninglessness. This is the hidden machinery. Suffering functions as an anchor against Schopenhauer's raging will, a shield against Jung's shadow, a socially approved identity, a bulwark against Sartre's terrifying freedom, and a desperate substitute for Frankel's meaning. It's not that we like the pain, it's that we need what it seemingly provides: structure, identity, intensity, distraction from deeper terrors. We become addicted to its function, mistaking the symptom for the solution, the cage for the shelter. The recoil in the silent night? It's the addict flinching from sobriety, preferring the familiar hell to the terrifying unknown of peace. But this functional addiction comes at a catastrophic, often unseen cost, a cost that silently shapes the very fabric of your reality and ours. The prison walls, it turns out, are lined with mirrors reflecting a distorted world. The machinery of your hidden addiction isn't idle. It doesn't merely hum in the background. It actively sculpts your reality, brick by invisible brick, building a prison whose walls you mistake for the horizon. This isn't passive suffering, it's an active, unconscious creation. And the consequences? They seep into every crevice of your being and ripple outwards, poisoning the wellspring of potential. Consider your perception itself. Neuroscience reveals a chilling truth. Your brain is a prediction engine, wired for efficiency, not truth. It filters the overwhelming chaos of raw reality through the lens of past experience and dominant narratives. What happens when your dominant narrative is woven from threads of struggle, lack, and threat? Your brain, addicted to the familiarity of suffering, becomes a master of confirmation bias. It scans the world relentlessly for evidence that confirms the story you unconsciously cling to. Life is hard, people disappoint, I'm not enough, danger lurks. A neutral glance becomes a slight. A minor setback becomes proof of inevitable failure. An opportunity becomes a potential trap. You don't see the world, you see a projection of your internal landscape of lack, curated by an addicted mind seeking its next fix of validating pain. Your suffering becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, a lens that distorts sunlight into shadow. This cognitive distortion is amplified by the neurological hooks of rumination. When you chew obsessively on past hurts or future fears, you're not just thinking, you're firing and wiring specific neural pathways. The brain regions associated with threat detection, like the amygdala, and the self-referential narrative engine, the default mode network, light up like a pinball machine on tilt. Each obsessive loop, each anxious projection strengthens the circuits. It becomes physically harder not to suffer. The mental groove deepens, and soon, falling into the familiar trench of worry or regret feels effortless, almost automatic. This isn't weakness, it's neurological entrenchment. Your addiction literally carves canyons in your brain, making the path of suffering the path of least resistance. Peace requires forging new, unpaved neural trails, a conscious, arduous rebellion against your own biology. The societal consequences are equally insidious, a hall of mirrors reflecting our collective addiction. We've built entire industries that subtly depend on our attachment to lack. Consumerism thrives on the poor. Perpetual dissatisfaction, Schopenhauer described, promising relief through acquisition that never truly satisfies. The wellness and self-help industries often peddle not liberation, but a new flavor of struggle, promising happiness just beyond the next ritual, the next program, the next purchase, keeping you hooked on the chase, not the arrival. Our media landscape drowns in negativity bias, feeding our neural addiction to threat and conflict. Even our social interactions can become contaminated. Shared suffering creates instant, albeit fragile bonds, commiseration over workloads, relationship woes, societal decay. To step out of this shared narrative, to radiate genuine, untroubled contentment, can feel like betrayal, inviting suspicion or isolation. The addiction becomes cultural, a shared language of discontent that masks a deeper terror of the void beyond struggle. Look at the life this creates, the paralysis of potential. How many dreams remain dormant, not because they're impossible, but because the fear of failure, the familiar ache of "it's too hard" or "I'm not ready," feels safer than the terrifying vulnerability of genuine effort and possible success. Success threatens the identity built on struggle. It threatens the known ecosystem of your suffering. So you stay small. You choose the known misery over the unknown risk of joy. Witness the chronic fatigue, not just physical exhaustion, but the soul-deep weariness of perpetually fighting phantoms, of maintaining the intricate defenses against peace, of feeding the beast of your own neurosis. The energy expended in sustaining the suffering and the rumination, the worry, the projection, the self-sabotage is colossal. Its energy siphoned away from creation, connection, and authentic living. Feel the stunted aliveness. Aldous Huxley's Soma offered blissful numbness. Your self-crafted suffering offers a different kind of numbness, an intense, dramatic numbness. The constant inner storm creates so much noise that the subtle textures of genuine experience quiet beauty. The simple joy, the profound peace are drowned out. You become numb to everything except the pain. You mistake the intensity of your suffering for the depth of your feeling, when in reality, it's a barrier against feeling the full, terrifying, beautiful spectrum of existence. This is the silent erosion. Day by day, choice by unconscious choice, you trade vibrancy for the grim comfort of the known. You exchange possibility for the illusory safety of your self-built cage. You sacrifice the vast open sky for the familiar, cramped dimensions of your pain. The tragedy isn't just the suffering itself, it's the life unlived in its shadow. It's the relationships never deepened, the creativity never expressed, the love never fully given or received, the moments of pure presence sacrificed on the altar of a familiar ache. You are not just enduring pain, you are actively, though invisibly, collaborating in the diminishment of your own existence. The prison isn't just holding you. You are its architect, its stonemason, and its most diligent guard. But what if the key wasn't out there? What if the rebellion begins not by breaking down the walls, but by realizing you hold the lockpick within? A radical shift in seeing that shatters the very foundation of the cell. The realization dawns like a cold blade. The prison exists, and you built it. The familiar ache isn't just happening to you, it's being perpetuated by you through unconscious collusion with the machinery of neurosis, societal conditioning, and the fear of the void. Seeing the bars is the first terrifying step, but seeing them also reveals something else. The lock is on the inside. Freedom isn't found by smashing the walls through sheer force of will or finding the perfect external solution. It demands something far more radical, far more counterintuitive, a rebellion against the very impulse to engage with the suffering itself. This is the heresy. Forget fighting the pain. Forget analyzing its roots ad nauseum, a favorite pastime of the addicted mind. Forget seeking yet another distraction or numbing agent. The rebellion begins with non-engagement. It starts with the agonizingly simple, yet profoundly difficult act of ceasing to feed the beast. Think of Viktor Frankl in the abyss of Auschwitz. Stripped of everything, facing unimaginable horror, he discovered a space Schopenhauer's blind will couldn't touch, the space between stimulus and response. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, Frankl wrote. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Your suffering, the anxious thought, the wave of dread, the replay of humiliation, is the stimulus. Your habitual unconscious engagement with it, the rumination, the catastrophic projection, the internal dramatization, is the response that fuels the addiction. The rebellion is fought and won in that sliver of space. It's the refusal to pick up the familiar heavy weapon of your narrative and start swinging. This demands a fundamental shift from reaction to witness. It requires cultivating what the Stoics, from Epictetus to Marcus Aurelius, called prosoche, attention, vigilance, the discipline of perception. It's not passive resignation, it's active, fierce observation, observing the machinery. When the familiar storm arises, the knot of anxiety, the flood of resentment, don't dive in. Step back. Become the scientist of your own inner chaos. Notice the physical sensation. Tightness in the chest, heat in the face, shallow breathing. Notice the thoughts. There's the "I'm a failure" script. There's the "everything will go wrong" prediction. Notice the urge to engage. There's the pull to replay that conversation, to imagine the disaster, to mentally argue. Label them all. Dispassionately. Sensation, thought, urge. This isn't suppression, it's detachment through lucid awareness. You see the gears turning, but you refuse to turn the crank. You feel the pull, but you don't let it reel you into the familiar, turbulent waters. As Jung might say, you withdraw the projection from the inner demon and simply see it. Anchoring in the raw present, the addicted mind lives in the reconstructed past or the projected future, the fertile breeding grounds of suffering. The rebellion requires grounding yourself fiercely in the undeniable reality of the present moment. Use your senses as anchors. What do you actually see right now? Not the interpretation, the raw visual data. What do you physically feel? The pressure of the chair, the texture of fabric, the temperature of the air. What sounds exist, pure and uninterpreted? The hum of electronics, distant traffic, your own breath. This isn't naive positivity. It's a strategic retreat to the only territory where the suffering narrative holds no inherent power. The immediate, sensory now. It shrinks the vast, menacing shadow of the addicted mind down to manageable sensory input. The Buddhist concept of mindfulness and the Stoic practice of focusing on the present task are weapons here. When you feel the void after the storm's cessation and recoil, stay with the void. Feel its texture. It's not annihilation, it's potential, space. Conscious creation, the ultimate rebellion. Non-engagement creates space. Anchoring in the present stabilizes it. Now comes the revolutionary act, filling that space with deliberate choice. Instead of unconsciously reaching for the familiar suffering narrative, choose what to place in that fertile void. This is where you move from defense to offense. Choose focus. Direct your attention, like a laser, onto a single, concrete action. Wash the dish completely. Write the next sentence. Feel the full stretch of a muscle. The addicted mind screams for attention. Starve it by focusing intensely elsewhere. Choose creation, microcosmic. Generate something, however small, that wasn't there before. Sketch a doodle. Hum a melody. Plant a seed. Write 3 lines. Cook a simple meal with full attention. Creation is the antithesis of the consuming nature of suffering. It builds instead of destroys. Choose connection, authentic. Reach out, not from neediness, but from presence. Make genuine eye contact. Truly listen to someone without formulating your response. Offer a simple kindness without expectation. This shatters the isolating walls of the self-referential suffering loop. Choose meaning, Frankl's imperative. Ask in this moment, stripped of the drama. What is being asked of me? What small action aligns with a value I choose to honor? Kindness, integrity, curiosity, creation? Then do that, regardless of feeling. Action precedes motivation for the recovering addict. This rebellion is arduous. Expect withdrawal symptoms. The addicted mind will rage, throwing up fiercer storms, louder justifications, deeper feelings of void and terror. It will whisper, "This is pointless. You're just avoiding your problems. Who are you without me?" Stand firm in the space. Observe. The tantrum. Anchor in a breath, a sound, a sensation. Choose a tiny act of creation or connection. You are not trying to feel better. You are practicing being free. You are dismantling the identity of the sufferer, brick by brick, replacing it with the identity of the observer, the creator, the chooser. It's not happiness you find first, it's sovereignty. The lockpick isn't a technique, it's the unwavering, moment-by-moment application of conscious awareness and deliberate choice in the space before the old addictive response. You stop building the prison, and suddenly the walls begin to crumble from disuse. The vast sky you feared reveals not annihilation, but an unimaginable, terrifying, and ultimately liberating truth about who you are when the war finally ends. The rebellion is underway. You stand in the space, observing the machinery instead of being crushed by its gears. You anchor in the raw, undeniable present, feeling the chair, hearing the distant hum, tasting the air. You consciously choose a breath, a focus, a tiny act of creation. Sovereignty flickers, but something deeper stirs beneath these acts of defiance. A final shattering question remains. Who is the you that observes? Who is the you that chooses? When the storm of suffering subsides and the void yawns, what stares back? Here lies the ultimate terrifying, liberating truth, echoing through the halls of mystics and sages. The you addicted to suffering was never real. That identity, the anxious one, the wounded one, the struggler, the fighter, was a phantom, a magnificent, intricate, painful illusion, a story woven from the threads of memory, societal conditioning, biological impulses, and the desperate need for coherence in a chaotic universe. Carl Jung hinted at it with the self, the totality of being, far vaster than the conscious ego. Eastern traditions like Advaita Vedanta state it bluntly, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. The separate suffering I is a mirage obscuring the boundless ocean of pure awareness. Your suffering wasn't just a cage, it was the frantic construction of a separate self, brick by painful brick. Every anxious thought, every grievance nursed, every replay of humiliation, it was all fuel for the furnace of ego. The ego needs conflict, lack, and narrative to exist. It defines itself against something, against the world, against others, against its own past or feared future. Without the struggle, without the enemy, internal or external, the ego feels it evaporates. That was the terror you felt in the silent void, not the fear of peace, but the ego's terror of its own annihilation. You weren't addicted to suffering, you were addicted to the illusion of a separate self that suffering sustained. The ache was the glue holding the mirage together. This is the paradigm shift that redefines everything. Freedom isn't the absence of pain, it's the absence of identification. It's the shattering of the mirror in which you only ever saw the reflection of your own constructed drama. When you truly see that the observer, the silent awareness witnessing the storm of thought, the surge of sensation, the urge to suffer, is not of the storm, not defined by it, but the vast, unchanging sky in which the storm arises and passes. Everything changes. The sensations may still arise. The old neural grooves might still fire. Life will still bring pain, loss, and challenge. But now, you perceive them differently. Pain becomes a sensation in the body, not the core of your identity. A fearful thought becomes a passing cloud in the sky of awareness, not a command. The void you recoiled from, it reveals itself not as emptiness, but as pure potential, the silent, fertile ground of being itself, untouched by the ego's drama. It is the space before the story, before the label, before the addiction. This is what Rumi pointed towards. The wound is the place where the light enters you, not the wound itself, but the shattering of the illusion it can provoke. It's what Eckhart Tolle experienced in his moment of despair, the collapse of the pain body, revealing the profound peace of presence beneath. It's the heart of Zen, dropping the narrative, the identity, the need to be someone, and simply being. The separate self dissolves like salt in the ocean, and you realize you are the ocean, vast, impersonal, and inherently free. Your suffering wasn't meaningless. It was the friction that finally wore down the illusion. It was the relentless teacher forcing you to look beyond the story. Every moment of anguish, every recoil from peace was a desperate cry from the phantom self, begging you to look deeper, past the persona, past the pain, to the source. The great addiction wasn't a flaw, it was the ego's final futile stand against its own unreality. So, what remains when the phantom fades? Not nothingness, not blissful ignorance, but raw, undefended aliveness, awareness itself, the capacity to experience the full spectrum of existence, joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, without being consumed by any of it. You are the canvas, not the painting. You are the awareness that hears the birds sing, feels the breeze, registers the ache in the knee, the anxious thought arise, and knows it is none of these things. You are the boundless space in which the entire human drama, with all its suffering and ecstasy, unfolds and dissolves. This is the ultimate liberation, realizing you were never in the prison to begin out. The bars were made of thought, the walls of story, the lock forged by mistaken belief in separation. The suffering was the shadow cast by the ego, mistaken for substance. Now the choice is stark, moment by moment. Will you rebuild the phantom? Will you grasp at the familiar ache, the comforting narrative of lack, the identity of the struggler? Or will you dare to rest in the vast, silent awareness that you truly are? Will you allow the waves of experience, pleasant and painful, to rise and fall without claiming them as mine, without weaving them into the old painful tapestry of self? The void beckoned, not with threat, but with a terrifying whisper of your true nature. Step into it, not as a victim, not as a fighter, but as the sky welcomes the storm. Let the phantom dissolve. What remains isn't death. It's the only thing that was ever real. You, aware, free. The war is over. It was only ever a dream. Now awaken.